Have you ever noticed how uneasy people become in silence, how quickly they reach for a phone, a conversation, a distraction, anything to fill the vast, echoing space of being alone? We live in a culture terrified of aloneness. We confuse it with loneliness, as if to be without company is to be somehow incomplete. Yet aloneness, in its true sense, is not the absence of others. It is the presence of yourself. Most people never meet themselves. They carry their bodies about, their faces smiling, their voices speaking, but the one behind the mask, the witness, the consciousness watching it all, remains a stranger. And when, by some twist of fate, life strips away their distractions, they encounter a silence so deep it feels like death. But it is not death, it is awakening. To be alone is to be with reality. There is a profound stillness beneath the noise of the world, and that stillness is what you are. But we have been taught to fear it, to treat solitude as a sickness, something to escape through constant occupation. You see, loneliness is a rejection of aloneness. It is aloneness resisted. When you sit alone and wish it were otherwise, that is loneliness. But when you sit alone and sink into the mystery of existence itself, when you feel the breath move in and out of your lungs and the pulse of life in every sound, that is aloneness. And in that aloneness there is no lack. There is only isness. The tragedy is that our entire civilization runs on the avoidance of being alone. We have built cities of noise, screens that flash endlessly, and 1,000 artificial identities to keep us entertained. We seek friends, lovers, crowds, not for connection, but for distraction. Because when we are finally still, the mind begins to whisper its questions. Who am I? What am I doing? Why am I afraid? And rather than listen, we run again into the arms of the world. But I tell you, the person who cannot be alone can never truly love. For if you cannot sit in your own company, if you need another to fill your emptiness, then you do not love them. You merely use them to escape yourself. Love arises only from fullness, from the one who needs nothing, because they have discovered everything within. That is why I say, aloneness is not loneliness. It is the beginning of freedom. Freedom from what? From the compulsive need to define yourself through others, from the endless performance of being someone for somebody, from the fear that you are nothing without applause. When you finally rest in your own being, when you stop seeking approval or belonging, you realize something extraordinary. You were never separate in the first place. The very consciousness that looks through your eyes is the same consciousness that moves the stars, the oceans, the wind through the trees. And then, paradoxically, you discover that to be alone is to be united with everything. It's a strange thing, isn't it? We spend our lives trying to merge with others, to dissolve into some ideal of love or belonging, when all along, what we sought was within the depths of our own solitude. But we must be careful here. Aloneness is not isolation. It is not withdrawal from life. It is not building walls or fleeing into the mountains in bitterness. True aloneness is the courage to face life as it is, without masks, without roles, without the crutches of distraction, and to stand naked before the mystery. The wise are not antisocial. They are simply not dependent. They can move through the marketplace with the same ease as they sit under a tree. They have made peace with their own company. Most people treat themselves like enemies. Their thoughts torture them, their self. Criticism is relentless. So naturally, being alone feels unbearable, but this is because they have not yet learned to listen to themselves as one listens to music, to let the thoughts and emotions come and go without clinging to any of them. You see, solitude becomes suffering only when you believe the chatter of your own mind. But when you sit quietly and watch without judgment, the thoughts become like clouds passing across the vast sky of awareness. And you realize you are not the clouds, you are the sky. The fear of aloneness is the fear of discovering this sky, like nature, because it means the end of control. The ego, which thrives on relationships, comparisons, and stories, cannot survive in the vast silence of pure being. So it distracts itself endlessly with noise, drama, and busyness. But when you allow yourself to fall into aloneness, when you no longer resist it, something miraculous happens. The very silence you feared becomes luminous. You begin to feel life in its raw, unmediated form, the hum of existence itself, and there, in that state, you understand, you have never been alone. The trees, the wind, the birds, the stars, everything is your companion, for everything is made of the same essence. The wave has never been apart from the ocean. It only thought so. But to realize this, you must first stand as the way, utterly alone, separate, trembling, and see that your very being is made of water. Then you dissolve back into the sea, not by losing yourself, but by awakening to your true self. Most people never reach this point because they cling to identity. They are terrified of losing their name, their story, their faith. But that is precisely what must be surrendered to taste freedom. Imagine a drop of water afraid to fall into the ocean, saying, "I do not want to lose myself." But what is it losing? Only the illusion of separateness. In truth, it was never anything but the ocean playing at being a drop. So too with you. Aloneness is the moment the drop begins to tremble, feeling the call of the sea. Loneliness is resisting that call. When you embrace aloneness, you let go. You fall, and in falling, you discover that there was never any fall at all, only returning. This is freedom. Not the freedom of doing whatever you want, but the freedom of no longer needing to escape yourself. And from that stillness, love arises, not as a need, not as an exchange, but as the simple radiance of being. You love the world as it is because you see yourself in everything. That is why the sages can sit alone on a mountaintop or walk unnoticed through a crowd, and their joy does not waver. They have touched the ground of being, and in that realization, every step, every breath, every silence is complete. You see, my dear friend, our modern world has made silence almost extinct. We live in a civilization intoxicated by motion and noise, as though, if we stopped moving, we might cease to exist. People fill every empty moment with the hum of conversation, music, and endless scrolling. But silence, true silence, is the space in which reality reveals itself. The moment you are alone and truly still, you begin to hear it not the silence of nothingness, but the living hum beneath all things. The pulse of existence itself, the soundless music that has been playing since before you were born. But most cannot hear it because their minds never stop talking. They are like a man who keeps stirring a pond and then wonders why he cannot see his reflection. The art of being alone is the art of letting the water settle. When it becomes clear, you begin to see not only your reflection, but the infinite reflected through you. Now, this is precisely why solitude is so uncomfortable for the unawakened ego. It depends on others to define itself. Without the mirror of other people's eyes, it begins to dissolve. It says, "Who am I if no one sees me? What am I without a story, a role, an audience?" And in that questioning, the ego trembles, because it realizes that the one watching is not the self it thought it was. The ancient sages said, if you would find the divine, go into your room and close the door. This is not a command to isolate, but an invitation to return inward. For there, behind the noise and the endless mental theater, lies the vast, open awareness that is the true you. It is curious how modern man fears the very thing that could free him. He fears silence because he fears seeing himself clearly. He fears solitude because he fears discovering that the person he calls I is but a dream, a fleeting pattern of thought within something infinite, and yet that discovery is the beginning of true life. When you are alone and at peace with it, you are no longer a slave to appearances. You do not need to perform. You no longer manipulate people or circumstances to confirm your identity. You are at ease with what is, and therefore, you become dangerous to all systems built on fear. The world will not understand you, for it cannot control one who is inwardly free. When you are rooted in aloneness, love ceases to be a bargain. It becomes the natural fragrance of being. You no longer seek others to fill your emptiness, but to share your overflowing. Relationships transform from dependency to communion, two beings who meet, not out of need, but out of abundance, and that is real intimacy. It is not clinging, but dancing, not possession, but presence. When two individuals meet in such awareness, there is no demand, no fear of loss, because there was never ownership to begin with. Each is whole, and therefore capable of true connection. But this can happen only when one has faced solitude and befriended it. The person who cannot be alone will always turn love into a prison and freedom into a threat. That is why so many relationships fail. They are not founded on love, but on escape. Two incomplete beings clutching each other for identity. But when the music of dependence stops, what remains is silence, and in that silence, they no longer know what to do. The irony is that only the one who has mastered solitude can truly love, because only that one is not afraid of losing. Now, when I speak of solitude, I do not mean merely physical aloneness. One can sit in a crowded cafe and be utterly alone in the most beautiful way. Aloneness is a state of consciousness, not geography. It is the awareness that you are complete, even as the world dances around you. To reach this, you must first let yourself descend into the very thing you fear. Sit quietly, feel the restlessness, let the loneliness come. Don't distract yourself, watch it, feel it, let it wash over you without resistance, and slowly the loneliness will begin to dissolve. What remains is a vast space, serene and luminous, the same space from which all thoughts arise and into which they vanish. That space is you. You have never been lonely. You have simply been mistaken about who you are. When you live from that space, life becomes effortless. You no longer cling to time or people or success. You play with them, yes, as one plays with waves on the shore, but you do not drown in them. And then something astonishing happens. The very aloneness that once terrified you becomes your deepest joy. You begin to crave silence, not as escape, but as communion. You sit quietly, and the world seems to unfold within you, the laughter of children, the rhythm of rain, the rustle of wind in the trees. All of it arises from the same silence you now call home. You realize that to be alone is to be in the presence of everything, for what you are is not separate from the whole. You are a temporary form through which the universe enjoys its own company. You could say the cosmos is playing a game of hide and seek with itself, pretending to be you, pretending to be me, pretending to be all these countless forms, just so it can rediscover its own magnificence. When you remember that, loneliness becomes impossible. How could the ocean be lonely when every wave is itself? But until that realization dawns, solitude will test you. It will strip away your false comforts and confront you with your own mind. You will discover the ghosts you've been running from, your regrets, your desires, your fears, all waiting patiently in the quiet. Do not flee them, sit with them. They are not enemies, but unintegrated fragments of yourself seeking reconciliation. And as you accept them, you will feel lighter, freer, more whole. This is why the mystics spoke of solitude as initiation. The forest hermit, the monk in his cell, the wanderer under the stars, they were not escaping the world. They were returning to its source. To be truly alone is to touch the root of existence, to see the machinery of thought and ego dissolve into something vast, compassionate, and eternal. You come to see that life itself is solitary in its essence, each being a unique expression of the same infinite mystery. And yet that solitude is not separation, but unity in diversity. The leaf is alone, yet part of the tree. The wave is alone, yet part of the sea. The star burns alone in the sky, yet the whole cosmos dances in its fire. So too are you. To awaken to your aloneness is to awaken to your belonging. For only when you are no longer afraid to be alone do you realize that you have always been at home in the universe. When you have truly embraced aloneness, something subtle begins to shift within you. The compulsion to seek purpose, to achieve, to prove yourself, all begins to lose its grip. You realize that life was never about becoming anything, it was always about being. And when the striving ceases, creativity blossoms. Not the kind of creativity born from ambition or insecurity, but the spontaneous flowering of existence itself. You see, most people create from tension, from a desire to be recognized, to leave a mark, to matter. But when you are comfortable in your solitude, you create as nature does, effortlessly. A flower blooms because that is its nature. A bird sings not to impress the forest, but because the song is inseparable from its being. So it is with you. When you are at peace in aloneness, your life becomes art. Every gesture, every breath, every silence becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of existence. You no longer divide your life into work and rest, purpose and play. It all becomes one continuous expression of being alive. From this stillness, creativity becomes play, divine play, what the Hindus once called Leela. You begin to see that existence itself is a kind of cosmic dance. There was never a plan, no divine accountant keeping score, no ultimate exam to pass. You were never supposed to figure out life. You were meant to live it, and yet, how can you live it fully if you cannot be alone? To be alone is to sit in the audience of your own consciousness and watch the drama of existence unfold. You laugh, you weep, you marvel at the absurdity of it all. But you no longer mistake yourself for the actor. You know you are the witness, the awareness in which all this comes and goes. This understanding changes everything. Even death begins to lose its sting. For when you know yourself as awareness, what is there to fear? Forms dissolve, yes, bodies, names, and stories vanish like ripples on water. But the water itself remains. You were never the ripple. You were the sea all along, and once you know that, loneliness becomes impossible. Because how could the sea ever be lonely when every wave is itself? You may be physically alone, yes. You may sit in a quiet room or walk through a forest with no one beside you. But the trees whisper, the stars listen, the air embraces you. You begin to sense the invisible web connecting all things, the subtle vibration of being that hums through every atom. You see, solitude is not a punishment. It is the teacher that reveals the unity of all life. But most of us spend our days trying to fill that silence because we have forgotten how to listen. We treat solitude as an emptiness to escape rather than the fullness it truly is. When you return to aloneness, you return to that fullness. You realize that the stillness you encounter there is not absence. It is presence. It is the infinite consciousness that was here before your birth and will remain after your death. So when the mind says, "I am alone," ask, "Who is this I?" Trace it back to its source, and you will find no one there, only the vastness that watches all things. And in that moment you will laugh, because the one who was afraid of being alone was never real. It was merely the echo of a thought, an illusion born from identification with a temporary form. The true self, the awareness behind the thought, was never alone, for it is everything. This realization is not something to believe, it is something to see. And when you see it, you find yourself free from the need to possess, to control, to cling. You love, but without fear. You act, but without anxiety. You create, but without demand for recognition. And life, in all its ordinary beauty, becomes extraordinary. You begin to find joy in simple things. The sound of rain on a window, the movement of your breath, the way light dances across a wall. You no longer need life to be anything other than what it is. That is freedom. It is not the freedom of rebellion, but the freedom of surrender, the freedom of no longer needing to fight the present moment. When you are truly alone, you stop running. You stop chasing the mirage of more. You see that the very longing for completion was the only thing keeping you from it. And so, paradoxically, the moment you stop trying to be whole, you are. Now, this kind of solitude is not taught in schools. It cannot be found in books or gained by technique. It reveals itself only when you cease all effort to find it. It comes quietly like the dawn, first unnoticed, then suddenly illuminating everything. So, my friend, if you find yourself alone, do not rush to fill the void. Sit in it, breathe, listen, allow the silence to speak. You will find that it is not empty at all. It is overflowing with life. And when you rise again, you will walk differently. You will speak differently. You will see others not as strangers, but as mirrors of the same being looking back at itself. You will laugh more easily. You will love more freely, because you will know that aloneness is not the opposite of connection. It is the foundation of it. Only the one who is whole can meet another in truth. Only the one who is not afraid of being alone can offer love without chains, and when such people meet, there is no loneliness between them, only space, stillness, and the sacred play of existence. For the flower that blooms in solitude does not ask who is watching. Its fragrance simply fills the air, and in that fragrance the whole world remembers what it means to be free,